So the Voices of War and Peace First World War Engagement Centre was set up in 2014 by the Arts and Humanities Research Council. So there were 5 centres in total funded across the UK, all based in universities, working with research networks across the country, made up of academics, cultural partners and community organisations and other practitioners in sort of heritage and arts and culture. Each of the centres was set up and had its own particular set of themes that it looked at, and we were all established to work with community organisations, primarily those that had been funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund, to support them in all sorts of different ways in terms of their projects.
I think for the AHRC it was about trying to shift in some ways the way in which academics work. The academics work outside the academy and work with communities and civic society mediators and so forth. In some ways generating data that maybe the Treasury would take notice of in terms of numbers, success and so forth, showing you do have a social and economic impact from humanities research. The engagement centres came into being when the AHRC put the call out, which was in 2013 to start in 2014. It's interesting that data 2013 because it's in the immediate aftermath of the warm glow of the Olympics, when Britain was demonstrating to the world in some ways what a multicultural society can be. In 2019 in my city, which I think is a very stable multicultural city, there was a series of attacks on mosques in Birmingham, and that was deeply shocking in a city where, yes, there has been racism, but yes, there's a lot of people recognise that racism must be challenged. It seems deeply disturbing that that fragmentation, that divisiveness, actually translated into very outward set of feelings that are unacceptable in our society. One can notice in that period, because of the debate on Brexit was so divisive, it seemed to allow people to articulate things they may have thought but not said before. They probably were there in 2012, but they were kind of hidden in some ways because we were being celebratory. The commemoration made us look inward rather than outward. And by looking inward, you then surface, I think, some things about, why we are special and, and how our country is changing and so forth. We finished the project in December 2019, and in January 2020, we leave the European Union, which in some ways has been, for the last 40 odd years, 50 years, a barrier to conflict. That is a lesson to be learned.
Our centre was based here in Birmingham, led by the University of Birmingham, and I was actually based in the Library of Birmingham, so it's been another sort of partnership project between the university and the library. Because the main focus of the project was community engagement, it made more sense for the coordinator to be based in the city centre, in the biggest public library in Europe, where we could access meetings rooms and spaces where we could hold events, and it sort of went towards breaking down those barriers between community organisations working with universities. As we were getting off the ground, we ran a series of events to explore the themes that we were interested in. We didn't really focus on the military history side of things. We were more interested in the experiences of women and children, how war impacted on cities, injured soldiers that were returning to Britain after being involved in the conflict, and wider sort of issues around commemoration as well, and how we remember wars and how we commemorate them.
I didn't think it was going to be the last event, but it's actually the last event, and for me it's really important that the last one, I think the last one is happening where it all started 128 years ago. So it's great that I was able to sort of bring in Yemen up in the conversation about what it meant to be involved in the First World War and what it means for people today. So the exhibition is taking place in the old print works, which is like an old factory. It's very important for me, it was very important to have it in Balsall Heath because they're very, very important Yemeni community who lives here. So we've got pictures that are actually 100 years old. And then we've got Ron's pictures, and then we've got these testimonials with interviews that we shot with people in Aden. We've got a video that we bought from the National Archives that was shot in Aden in 1914. And then we commissioned somebody to go shoot exactly the same place today. We did 14 interviews with Yemenis who live in Birmingham. We've got their portraits and we've got quotes from them. We've got an amazing Yemeni community in Birmingham. Their parents are stuck and their families and their loved ones are stuck in the war. This country is basically funding that war, or at least selling arms that are involved in that war. And so it's absolutely important that we speak about Yemen more. And
as a mother myself, you can't even imagine for your children to be growing up in that kind of environment. I think they touched on it as well, that the children grow up and all they play is war.
It's important to have these kind of exhibitions because you don't know how many people are unaware, and it's civilians here who are from minorities that have come over who may feel their message is not getting heard. They need to find community, they need to find a voice.
This is what I love so much about Voices, is that it always involved, or it always gave priority to other people's opinions and voices. And so it made space, but actually seriously made space, because there's a lot within academia about how we go about co-design and collaborative research. But in reality, what academics end up doing is they've got this idea about this amazing thing they want to do, and they just do it. And then they bring the community partner and they're like, right, this is it. But actually with this project, it actually involved thinking with community partners about how we want to do things. I'm very grateful for everything I've learned. Ian is my mentor, so he reads my stuff and he basically gives me very honest opinion about my work, and this has been a very important part of my own career development. So beyond the exhibition and me being able to bring these perspectives from the Arab region onto a British context, I've grown up a lot. There's definitely a sense of more people know about this now, more people talk about black soldiers' contributions, more people talk about Muslim soldiers' contributions to the First World War. And so that's definitely a big impact of this project that's been running for 6 years. It already sat quite nicely within the COI's ongoing research. I guess we're just going to go off and continue doing what we're doing.
This sort of community engagement thing has become more and more popular, or people are more aware of it as we've gone on. So to be involved in a project that is primarily focusing on that has been fantastic.
It's more interesting to engage with communities and share your knowledge than it is to go to a conference of academics and present an academic paper. So you're seeing this kind of shift going on about people growing in different ways as a consequence of working differently. And that seems to be a really, really powerful story. That is one we need to just remind people of. You know, we shouldn't lose sight of the success we've had with this model, which is that people have participated, people have produced things, academics have learnt new skills, communities, historians have learnt new skills. So all those positives you have to build on. You have to then step back and say, okay, what are the mechanisms? And I think some of the mechanisms could be building much closer relationships of dialogue between communities and universities is one way. I think it's building into the career structure for young academics, that public engagement is something that they should engage with as part of their career path, and therefore they should get experience of that. Maybe that model can be one that could actually be rolled out on a regional basis, or can be rolled out when other moments of commemoration come along.
In a sense, you're talking about multiple collaborations, because you've got the project and the centre, you've got the project and the community groups, and the best projects work seamlessly across three. If you as a project leader is having a challenging relationship or an unguided relationship, actually I think is quite often the case, it helps if you've got a nice sort of message coming down as well, as this is the sort of thing you should be doing, these are sorts of things we're focusing on, you focus on that too. So for me, actually, it's been very broadly across all relationships a positive experience.
I think the way the Engagement Centre works, partnering up academics and community groups, for me was personally very gratifying. It was a really good project to be on. I felt very well supported.
The crucial thing for small community organisations, they always made sure we were paid on time, if not in advance, which was very, very helpful. And I think it's that kind of understanding from an academic organisation that's quite rare.
You know, you could connect with people on a national level, and only through having that centre, through having that hub there, I think is it possible. So together with the funding support, I think it really helped us to tap into a wider network of people that are interested in in this history, and that went beyond, you know, the university or the museum's own circles, really.
I think the centre has been very democratic in the way that it's worked, and that it's attempted to bring in people, not academics, but also to make sure that the voices are heard of the groups that have participated in these various projects.
Those who participated in this project, some had a knowledge of the First World War, many didn't, and those that did, war was war. You know, war was Flanders Field, it was trenches, it was mud. It wasn't that actually war has a much bigger effect than that. And many more different people participate in it than just the soldier in the trench.
It's really good to see the different organisations come together that have a different slant on how they deal with, how they research, how they treat the stories that they come across and how they share them.
Clearly there's been a level of engagement across age ranges, across different black and ethnic minority communities, and touching on important issues such as, you know, gender and sexuality.
I've been able to engage with other groups, other communities, so we can start working on how we continue to create a platform for the narratives that are being unearthed.
I think Britain has rather compartmentalised the First World War. You know, the narrative of victory, the narrative of empire, and I think there are quite a few projects which have taken place which I wouldn't say were against that narrative per se, but they wanted to go deeper. They wanted to kind of get the stories out there that, you know, who were these people? And I have to say, it's been a bit like reclaiming our ancestors.
The community groups who've gone through the process, all those people have become really talented, non-academic, but actually doing academic work researchers, citizen historians and so forth. Is, okay, what do they do next? And what is the role of the university in supporting them to achieve what they want to do?
The centenary in the round has been a worthwhile experience. It has brought hidden histories out into the open. My own project, for example, has put a lot of stuff online. So there's a conversation to be had about how all that is preserved going forward.
There's a lot of new knowledge that's emerged, and I think a lot of people are thinking, what do we do with it? Where does it go so it becomes part of a wider narrative? How does it get disseminated?
Some of the legacy of the Voices Centre will be the resources that they were creating. So I know that they are working on resources which collect some of the lessons learned, which sum up the work that they've been doing, and which share those for new audiences and people looking to do similar work in the future. I definitely think the Voices Centre was a success. I think it was a real proof of the success of that funding from the AHRC, and supporting community historians to work alongside academic historians is one of the most positive lessons, I think, from that. And I hope that it continues.
Ian and I have recently written a paper on the kind of processes around it, which is really interesting to me. And I quite like that there have been lots of challenges. There's lots of areas where universities need to do much, much better in terms of engaging with community groups. I sort of feel I've developed a real understanding of that through this project. So in terms of my career, it's been a fantastic opportunity. And also I've got to work with some really interesting and nice people on their projects, mainly in Birmingham, but also across the country. These groups are friends now. They're not just, you know, colleagues or people that I've worked with. And hopefully those relationships will continue once the project finishes.
None of this would have happened without the support from the AHRC, from the advice we got from the AHRC and the Heritage Lottery Fund, from key people who work in those organisations who are passionate about this initiative being successful. The academics who joined the centres early on and stayed through all the way and continued to deliver on the agendas that were set and agreed with them. And also the people I worked with in the other centres and with Nicola, who I've worked with now for 6 years. Those are strong relationships that will continue.